Welcome to NORR 2024 speakers that this year will each address the state of the future of architecture and engineering. I am Carlos Gonçalves, sitting in for Sylvia Baldessera, the chair of NORR, founder of NORR and our host. NORR is a continuing education program founded 17 years ago with three main goals: to teach, to learn, improve, and to do each of these continuously. The program relies on bringing the best guest speakers in the three series, Architecture, Engineering, and Masters. Each of the NORR virtual sessions since 2020 have been recorded and are available on NORR YouTube for global access. Welcome to all our NORR or our NORR 14 office staff and our invited guests globally. Participant schools. Welcome the invited students of the 16 schools of architecture in Canada, the US, and the UK. And welcome to Dan Shannon and Mike Zaborski, who will be presenting today's presentation. Dan Shannon, AIA, is a principal of MDAS Architects in New York City and is an internationally recognized leader in commercial design. With 4 decades of experience, his expertise has been honed through the involvement in the construction of over 50 million square feet of urban fabric. Noteworthy achievements include the restoration of the iconic GM building, including the incorporation of the Apple Cube into its plaza, earning a Masterworks Award for Best Privately Owned Public Space. He has also spearheaded the redevelopment of numerous prominent buildings along Bryant Park, Madison Avenue, and Park Avenue, and most recently, Penn 1 and Penn 2 of the Penn District, earning an AIA New York State Award of Merit for Penn 2. Dan creates thoughtful, holistic architecture that transcends the building and reimagines the urban context. His consideration for the neighborhood makes him more than a monument builder, but rather a fabric maker of great cities. Presenting with Dan is Mike Zaborski. AIA is a principal at MDAS Architects in New York City, Canadian-born architect, born and raised in Kitchener and a graduate of Carleton. Mike was instrumental in the recladding of the first Canadian place in Toronto, Canada, as well as a diverse range of projects, including master plans, commercial buildings, cultural and mixed-use developments. Most recently, Mike completed the revitalization of the Met Building at 200 Park Avenue, honored as the best large commercial building and amenity space by Interior Design Magazine in 2022. Over the past decade, Mike has also worked to complete a 3.5 million square foot mixed-use master plan in Long Island City, comprised of the Department of Health building completed in 2011, and the Jacks, which won the best large commercial lobby and amenity space by Interior Magazine in 2021, as well as numerous landscape and architecture awards, including Architizer's Best High-Rise Office Building and Best New Commercial Facility from the AIA Long Island. Both a conceptual thinker and pragmatic leader, he consistently and creatively brings design concepts into reality while promoting MDAS's commitment to modern design and the craft of architecture and planning. Welcome, Dan and Mike.
Thank you very much, Carlos. And to Sylvia, I'd like to thank both of you and the full NORR team. Your all's commitment not only to architecture, the profession, engineering, but to community is well established in not only this program, but in the work you do. And we're thrilled to be a part of it today. Today we're going to talk about, it's an interesting title, Future Destinations, how to turn old buildings into new destinations. So we've got a lot of time period in there, and I rather like it because, you know, what we all do is along a continuum of time and experiences. And I want to start with the Pantheon. And, you know, the destination is something that offers a memorable experience. And I'm sure everyone on today has had such an experience, and certainly the Pantheon provides that. It is currently the #1 attraction in Rome. And it used to be a Roman temple, and then a church. And then, as you know, it's a cemetery for many notable people. But today, it's a destination. You can go to the next one, Mike. I want to start by showing a series of buildings, not all of them 2,000 years old, that we've had the pleasure of working on. And at one time, they looked different, they behaved differently, they performed differently, they had a different use. And now all of that has changed. And cumulatively, these experiences that we've had with our team members and the techniques that were established have led to a culmination of the work we did at the Penn District, which Mike will show in detail shortly. Another thing I want to touch on while we do this is the change in the model of the core and shell architect and then the tenant or program architect. That model has dissolved and it's been replaced with a much more collaborative, much more engaging example of teams working together to prepare buildings for use and for meaning and hopefully for destination. I'm showing, to start with, the General Motors building that was built by designed by Edward Durrell Stone on Fifth Avenue in the Plaza District in New York City. And we were tasked as part of the design team, a very large team, to recreate this 1950s, 1960s office icon into a place for people. And with Apple and Peter Bolin of BCG, who designed the cube, we transformed what was a parking garage in a sunken plaza into probably the greatest commercial destination in the United States and challenges the world in the cube itself and the products it delivers. And also, we're showing what was the car showroom for General Motors when they were headquartered here in New York, and now is the Christian Dior boutique. And I think there's a very good example. It shows that a development piece really needs that tenant interface to enliven and enrich it in their sensitivity toward not only the urban scale, but also their product in these woven forms that they superimposed onto the facade, really enriched the work that we did without them. So we're going to stick with Edward Durrell Stone. He did 3 major office buildings, one in New York, one in Chicago, and of course, something that's dear to all of us in Toronto, the First Canadian Place. A magnificent building, very technically advanced, but it had one real problem. The 45,000 pieces of Carrara marble that he embellished the building with on the facade finally were succumbing to gravity and what's called hysteresis, which is the warping that occurs when the pressures on the two sides of the panel are uneven. So, and indeed, one of them, as all of our guests from Toronto know, one of them did fall to the ground and luckily didn't hurt anyone. With an extraordinary team, including B+H and Viracon, the North American glass manufacturer, and the only doctor of glass that I know, Dr. Scott Norville from Texas, we embarked on a process to develop a 5-ply glass panel that's 8 foot high, 10 foot wide, that could recreate the richness and the brightness and the quality of the Carrara marble, but perform in a way that would give this building its future. And as you see from left to right, what Ed Stone created, and then a during process in the middle with the two mass dampers that many of you might remember that were climbing the building to recreate that. And then, of course, the final product on the right, which is much a great resemblance of the beginning, but we did decide as a team that the inverted corners could be more dramatic in contrast with the rest of the building and really strengthen the verticality of Stone's composition. Back in New York now, on the map, we have kind of the belly button of Manhattan, which happens to be at 42nd Street and Avenue of the Americas, and it's Bryant Park. Bryant Park is one of the rare parks in the midst of the city. Everyone knows the Central Park and some of the periphery parks, but dead center in Manhattan is a small park called Bryant Park with the main Clare Hastings Library on Fifth Avenue. The next slide shows what I call the crime report from the 80s of that. And indeed, the decline in this area and of that upkeep and maintenance of the park had created a very, very difficult urban condition that we're showing on the screen here. And with the city and the business improvement districts, they were able to revive the park, program the park, and the park became the catalyst for the redevelopment of the area. And in the next slide, we're showing that plan of Bryant Park and 42nd Street. And Mike and I were very fortunate to be involved with a number of team members to redevelop several of the buildings. Starting on the left is 3 Bryant Park, which used to be the New York Telephone Building. And then 2 Bryant Park was the HBO headquarters, and the Grace Building was one of the monuments that Gordon Bunshaft and SOM had created in the 70s for the building product company, the Grace Building. And what that park was able to endear to the entire area is the interest in investment and redevelopment of these buildings. The picture here was indeed the public space, the plaza behind the New York Telephone Building, which was 3 Bryant Park. And you can see that it is an urban challenge, desolate, uninviting, and in need of change. And with the city planning work, we were able to redevelop that park, create an amenity building on the left called the Cubes, and then redesign that park within the regulations of city planning for planting and trees and seeding and programming and so on, and create an ancillary public space that supports the pressure that is on Bryant Park. And across the way at the Grace Building, at the time, these plazas didn't require those same level of amenities, and you can see the resulting architecture that came from that, fairly severe. And with the changes in the city's regulation and investment, and with MNLA, Signe Nielsen, working with Brookfield, we were able to do a significant change to not only the HBO building that you see behind the plaza, but the plaza itself, to reactivate that, and indeed became part of the headquarters for Bank of America. So these are a couple of projects that we were able to be a part of that redirected the district around Bryant Park and created not only a commercial but an entertainment hub for the city that didn't exist. Going back a few years, I have a pause in here. This one is the old auditorium for Columbia University Medical School. And this is a situation where it is in the entry to the campus for the medical school, a very important institution in New York City. And the most important piece of it, which is the lecture hall, is hidden in this brick box. And indeed, Columbia recognized that deficiency and asked us to participate in the transformation of this building into a building that revealed the importance of what happens inside, and it becomes the gateway into the campus. So it has that dual purpose. So this is exactly the building that was there with the brick removed, new glass. Underneath of this is the entire steam plant, energy plant for the entire campus. So it had a lot of pressure on it, and we maintained the lecture series that occurred during the academic year through a lot of this construction. But in the end, it was a significant transformation. And along that side, they recognized that the auditorium needed to be updated in terms of technology and comfort and lighting and in terms of use, because it's also becomes a theatrical performance space. And through the generosity of another donor, we were able to participate in the restoration and rejuvenation of the theater space itself. Moving on, and going back in time, this wonderful picture shows what was the Irving Trust Building by Ralph Walker, one of the great architects of the 20s and 30s, in his Deco masterpiece of the Irving Trust Building. We were part of a very large and dedicated team led by Harry Macklow for the transformation of this building several years ago, from an office building to a home of 600 apartment units. And we the technology of transforming an office building into residential units is pretty intense, but we were guided by the principles that Ralph Walker Thomas brought through his interest in patterning in the Jazz Age. And it was an extraordinary project. And if anybody knows the financial district of New York City, it was in desperate need of a grocery store. So what was a bank is now a Whole Foods, and a contributor to the urban form in Lower Manhattan. The most wonderful piece of it was the pool that was put on the addition of that, and it is a one-of-one experience in being able to be that intimate with the New York Harbor without actually having to swim in the New York Harbor. Just a wonderful experience to be involved in. About the same time, 1927, this building was the Masters Printing Building. New York City was a primary place for publishing and printing in the world. The west side of Manhattan, this is on 33rd and 10th Avenue, was zoned for manufacturing, and a number of print houses were there. It was just a remarkable building. This is a picture on 33rd Street of the loading dock. The next picture you see is that, again, several years ago, having worked on this project for the transformation of it to a commercial office building. 33rd Street, as we'll show later, has become the boulevard down to Hudson Yards and the whole West Side development of New York. So it's become a very much used avenue connecting Penn Station to the West Side. You can see the manufacturing building itself that we started with, which was a beautiful brick structure that had not been treated well over time. And to transform it into an office building meant increasing the window size in this fantastic concrete structure within, but we used the technology of new windows and cutting the spandrel to greatly enhance the amount of light coming into the building while taking out all the energy. And quickly we moved on to Midtown again, to the what is the MetLife building, and you all recognize it as originally the Pan Am building. And this is a project that Mike and our founding partner, Raul Diarmas, worked quite a bit on for decades. And this is an example where legacy matters and is sometimes forgotten. This is an office building primarily designed by Walter Gropius, and it was in need of a strong reminder of the strength of that architecture and its connection to people. And our office, with a number of other wonderful consultants and investors, really brought this property back to its prominence in New York without losing the legacy that Gropius brought to it. You can see the original entry was somewhat dark, somewhat confusing, not very inviting, and with the work that we did on it, you can go to the next one, Michael, you can see that we took the travertine that was fundamentally a part of the architecture on the interior, brought it to the outside, relit everything, and then as a very important part of its connection to Grand Central Station, the other significant transportation hub in New York City, we recreated the Joseph Albers mural that had been originally a fundamental part of the entry into the city from the commuter lines, which you see on the left, but had been lost sometime in the 2000s, and then recreated completely with the Albers Foundation. And that is part of that idea of destination, because this is really part of your memory of going to and from the commuter lines, train lines into New York. Thank you, Michael. And one other example in London, in the Victoria subdistrict, the building that you see on the left was a building from the 1990s. It was underperforming, both in the market, but as a recognition as a place for people to work and thrive, and also from a performance standpoint, energy performance standpoint. And with the firm of Ockett and Swanky in London, and with MDS, we were able to transform this building into what's called Verde. And it really, I think, was a terrific transformation, both from an energy point of view, but from a user's point of view, in terms of bringing the outside back into the building, and then creating the spectacular set of terraces overlooking Buckingham in London. All of those kind of techniques leads us to the Penn District. You all recognize this as the original Penn Station by McKinley and White, built in 1910, a fantastic building. And it's interesting from a destination point of view. This is where you either began or ended your destination, both with regard to the Penn Central Rail, line, and also the Long Island Railroad. And one of the greatest sad stories is that it didn't last but 50 years before somebody thought they had a better idea. And that certainly didn't become the place, as you all know the story, that the demolition and replacement of that building with what you're looking at now created an emphasis on the heritage of our buildings in New York City and throughout the world, and helped create the Landmarks Commission in New York City so that this wouldn't happen again. But indeed, it did happen. This building was built, and we then began a very intense process over 10 years of its revitalization and transformation into a new destination. I'll give you a bit of background, and then Mike will take us through the full story. On this slide, you see the 1910 building and its facade of the building along 7th Avenue. The replacement in 1963 is very progressive idea to bring the Madison Square Garden in its 4th location into the development, this nearly 2 million square foot office building, but all on top of the busiest transportation hub in North America, and the resulting facade on that. And of course, in 2023, we've essentially finished the redevelopment of this building, and with the task of addressing many of the issues that were created by its replacement in 1963. Next. Just to orient us, we've moved a little bit south and west from Bryant Park into the Penn District, which is essentially on 34th Street and 7th Avenue. This area has had an enormous amount of activity in the last decade or so, and with Related and Oxford's investment in Hudson Yards, which was the rail yards for Penn Station. So the intense amount of development new there, and then Brookfield's development of Manhattan West, and then the wonderful story of the recreation of the Farley building, which was the McKinney White Post Office by Vornado. And then you can see what is called the Penn District in New York, which stretches all the way to 5th Avenue, but the center of which is the Penn Station and Penn 1 and 2. You can see in this axonometric from the river all the way to 5th Avenue, the intensity of urban fabric here. There is 35 million square feet of office building in this area. That is larger than the entire commercial offering in the city of Cleveland. So you can see that we're talking about a sizable scale of urban activity, as you can see. And you can see in the middle of it, Penn 1 and Penn 2. And Vornado had, under the leadership of their chairman, Steve Roth, had come to the conclusion that it was time to bring that energy that had been developed into the west back toward the east, back toward the center, and make a significant development into Penn 1, which you see on the right side. Now you see on the right side a 2 million square foot office tower, and Penn 2, which you see on the left side. The basic idea of it, both from a urban point of view and a development point of view, is to reconnect the buildings to the urban environment, to recreate an engaging public realm throughout that, and to create the new work paradigm, in which I referenced earlier, moving away from the idea of the core and shell concept into the collaborative activity of creating a workplace that engages with people. if we go back to the General Motors building or even the Pan Am building, those two buildings were headquartered buildings. And indeed, many headquarters already had that idea of what do the people need that are going to work in this building to do to perform their tasks in an effective, progressive, and collaborative way. And it often involved cafeterias and auditoriums and conferencing centers and so on. And in the development world, that concept had gotten diluted. And in this project and many other projects throughout the world today, we have gone back to that model of taking the core and shell concept and the user programming idea and done those together, as Mike will take us through throughout there. But just some of the numbers that we are dealing with here, there are 650,000 commuters that go around this district today. The commuter lines, Amtrak, and the subway lines. So it's an intense amount of public pressure just in terms of the pedestrian count on the street. The Madison Square Garden contributes 320 major events every year, almost daily. Not only the Rangers and the Knicks, but Billy Joel and on and on and on. And that is a major player in this area. And then, of course, the combined effort of the two office buildings of 4.4 million square feet of connected campus office. And our task was with an extraordinary team was how to unravel the tangle and the nightmare that had been created in the destruction of the original Penn Station and give agency to all of the users of this area and create a first-in-class destination for transportation, entertainment, retail, and workplace. And I think, Michael, at that point, I'm going to hand it over to you. Explain how we got there.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. I think what we'll start with is I'm going to set the stage, right? So what you're looking at here, the two buildings, in behind it is Madison Square Garden. It's kind of that blue zone right in behind it there. So when we look at that as architects, we're going to kind of go a little bit diagrammatic here first. Overall, you've got Penn 1 on the right and Penn 2, kind of these ghosted images. And what we've done here, a series of programmatic diagrams that just show what the existing condition was when we found it. 7th Avenue is where the main entrance to Penn 1 was located, and 34th Street and was for Penn 1. Both buildings also had a back side to them that had basically equal lobby sizes. They were both small, very efficient, single-story high spaces. You would enter in, you get your pass, you go up through security, get up into the office space as quick as possible. That was the mode of what these buildings were designed originally. So building on the great development energy that Moynihan Station and the Farley building, which is the office component of that, there's 740,000 square feet of office building that was there. It ended up becoming New York, Facebook's New York headquarters. And there they also had 120,000 square feet of supporting curated retail that was there as well. So when we look at these two buildings here, we're building on that. Really, this becomes the heart of the Penn District. So reimagining this 4.4 million square feet from the inside to out, right? So this diagram here is really of the ground floor. So what we ended up doing is repositioning the Penn 1 entry to 34th Street, creating a larger, more generous entry, and filling in the space in behind there. There's essentially Vornado, as a part of this development, at Penn 1 alone, took 300,000 square feet of the bottom 3 floors offline, right? There used to be a single-story entry with supporting retail. It was a big box Kmart store on the south side over here, on the east end, closer to 7th Avenue. That got taken offline and infilled with these inward turning amenities and supporting curated retail pieces. And the idea is that these 2 buildings act as a campus connecting the amenity program between the 2. As we go up through the 2nd floor, you start to see how the program continues to develop. Up here on the 2nd floor, you end up having a series of meeting spaces, a conferencing center, that's that large blue zone on the left-hand side. There's a social forum that gets connected up from a large stair that's up in there. Tons of social seating and lounge spaces for the social events, and also workspace, as well as wellness. This is all on the One Penn side. There's a large gym component, fitness and wellness, that was done. There was actually a 3-story addition to the programming that didn't exist before within the space. And right now, the 2 buildings are imagined with the bridge that comes across and connects over to 2 Penn, which has a different offering of program elements over there. At 2 Penn, there's going to be a 300-person town hall, which will show you green rooms that support that, catering facilities, cafes, and casual work lounges, and also rooftop space and open park up on the top of the building. We're looking at these things to really try and activate all the spaces within the building. Some of these areas, diagrammatically, they become these programmed exterior spaces. Some of them are for private tenant use, but also some of them are shared exterior space, which we find does really a demand in the office market as well. What also occurred around this thing is that there's about 1.5 acres of exterior space that was redesigned, that engages with the public and the neighborhood down below. So what we'll do is walk you through a quick series of images of Penn 1. This is that completed front entry off of 34th Street. You can see here on the left-hand side is what the building looked like originally. It was kind of a silver and black building. That's that low 1-story high entry off to on the left-hand side in the image. And it was quite fortified with the existing landscaping that was there. There was these terraced areas, but it was very difficult and for the public to engage in these raised plaza levels. The surrounding site of 1 Penn is all privately owned public space. So you can see on the right-hand side here, really opening up the connection from the sidewalk up to the upper levels here, so that there's access. What this piece right here was an addition that was added onto the 34th Street side that conceptually was the front porch of the building. It's a double height storefront and enclosure that opened up to a double height space on the inside. This was space that we actually ended up trading for the public space, but in reality, what we ended up doing is opening up all those things, bettering the public space to the current standards, and introducing a new Penn Station entry just to the west of this image here, with elevator access and direct escalators that go to the northwest corner of Penn Station below, which really was starved for an entry. As we come inside, this is just inside the storefront. This is that new enclosure on the left-hand side. And you can see there's a sequence of these terrace spaces that open up. There's a connecting stair that goes directly up to the 2nd floor amenity. And you can see here, this is with all of the interiors here were done with our design partners at A+I, stands for Architecture and Information. They've kind of built their career over the last 27 years of really taking apart office spaces from the inside out and bringing these programmed spaces down to engage you as you're entering into the building. And you can see here in this next sequence here is just some of the level of finishes and quality of the spaces that were designed. On the upper left is this new meeting space that's up at the top of the stairs that is activated for casual presentations. There's large LED screens just to the left there. And that opens up to food and beverage component, which is the upper right-hand photos here of the landing, which is a new full-service restaurant that was installed on the second floor here. It has no direct access to the exterior, so it's your primary access is from the workspace coming up through this sequence of spaces. It serves obviously the public, but also caters to the 2.5 million square feet of office space at Penn 1. And what the thing when we created that new entry, we also had to cut openings throughout the building, so you can see up through there's essentially the bottom 3 floors have large openings that were created to transfer that area so that we could enclose that entry on the front side. So what this does kind of sets the stage for this was the first project coming online for these 2 buildings here. This was essentially completed in 2022, and what it leads is to and I'll put a quick teaser trailer of the building and what it offers, and then we'll do a deeper dive into strategies that we use to execute this one. So where did we start, right? Right now, what we've got here is a view on the left-hand side of Penn 2 that was taken just before the renovation started here and the repositioning. So you can see that kind of references back to that initial photograph that Dan had spoken to with the entry to Madison Square Garden, and you can see the density of the urban fabric that we have here, the amount of people that are out on the street. And over on the right-hand side is an early rendering that we had of the way that this building would touch down and start to create these new architectural moments that engage the neighborhood and start to create this large civic space that we'll be going through. So this story really has 4 chapters, right? So the first one is really the untangling of the urban experience. It was quite dense and chaotic at this location on 7th Avenue. You can see MSG in the background there. The front entry of this building really is the front door to Madison Square Gardens. We're going to talk about activating the bottom 50 feet of the building. That really occurs underneath what this bustle, what we call this horizontal addition onto the front of the building. It's really a one-of-one space. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we finished off the rest of the building and transformed the workplace itself. So another series of diagrams here, just showing what the existing condition was that when we found the building. It's the design parameters really based on what we have here is a 31-story building sitting on top of 3 levels of train station below. There's 21 tracks that run underneath this thing, and you can see the lobby we've kind of highlighted in the middle there. Beside that are these 2 flanking exterior connectors that go through there and get into Madison Square Garden. What occurred here, similar to Penn 1, is that the buildings were on this raised plaza. And you can see here, I'll show you with the mouse here. These areas here were quite fortified and with these large walls, really restricting access up to these areas. So in behind them were really these leftover spaces that with the density was quite, the public really didn't feel comfortable going up into these areas unless you're trying to get to either to MSG or trying to get into the lobby there. What you see, the big flat zone in the middle here is where the existing entry was that came out of Penn Station. This is one of the most active entrances. It's the one that leads on the east side, is the furthest east entrance. So you'd be coming out of here and then heading toward East Midtown. South right now is on your left, and north is up on the right-hand side of these images. There is an additional entry coming out, which is New Jersey Transit, which also connects into Penn Station below, but has they have a few different lines on that side. So there's a large amount of people coming out here. But you can see that there's a lot of confusion about where you're actually trying to get up through and a crossing over of the circulation of the space. So we'll start getting into some of the solutions that we had here. So the first thing was take that raised podium and actually extend it out. Get rid of all of those barriers that were around the perimeter, the visual and physical barriers. Create a number of access points for accessibility to get up this large area. And in doing that, also widen the 7th Avenue sidewalks, right? So working with DOT and our team at Sam Schwartz and M&LA landscape architects, this was a multi-year effort to get that sidewalk widened, which essentially took a lane of traffic out of the very busy 7th Avenue. The other main thing here too is what you see here labeled as Plaza 33 used to be West 33rd Street that ran through the site in between Penn 1 and Penn 2. So that now also was closed off and became a urban plaza on the street. So this is what that ground floor plane was cleaned up as. So there's a new entry that a lot more transparent, lighter, that was created here with in collaboration with Foster and Partners that in the middle here. And then there was a new entry that was actually done by the state for Penn Station. This was SOM did the swoop entry here that got you down to the Long Island Railroad concourse. So you now have 3 transit entry points going down to Penn Station on the east side. So taking a little bit of the pressure off of the 2 original ones. And then New Jersey Transit remaining the existing one on the south end. So what the next steps, what we took here, just looking at this thing, is really trying to find a solution for the circulation issue. And doing this in 2 things. One, relocating the lobby to the north side of the building. The Penn 1 is just across the street here. So really having these 2 entry points of Penn 2 and Penn 1 so that they're closer to one another, and taking that pressure off of the middle of the building. You can see creating these large architectural arches that signify where Madison Square Gardens is, and also cleaning up the signage and environmental graphics that go on in these areas here. So that was a large step. What that does is it's opened up the circulation. Plaza 33 now is a closed street and is a part of the public realm. So there's a large, essentially a park put in the middle of that area with seating integrated around the new trees. And it starts to really create a place here, right? And then we start to introduce the architectural elements that start to define what Penn 2 itself is. This bustle here is, there was a long effort that went into trying to figure out where the addition could occur. The building itself didn't have the structural capacity to add it up on the top of the building, which is kind of a natural solution, especially because part of the building for Pen 1 here is, was occupied during this effort here. So the goal here was to create new space and add it onto the east side. And what we ended up doing is lifting it up off of the plaza area by about 50 feet to create a covered space that's for the public, that lands right at the front of doors of Pen 2. And then you see this town hall here addition on the north end as well that engages with the park. So to get the bustle to work, with the 21 rail lines down below, any new column that came down through there was a time and a money issue, right? So they would actually have to shut tracks down, to build Hudson Yards. It was massive shutdown of tracks one at a time to build the foundation systems that go through this thing. Here at Pen 2, the solution is not disturb the tracks, right? So what you see here, these slope columns here that hold up the bustle, they engage down into these red zones. Those red zones are these transfer girders and clusters that go down to individual columns that were already there from the original Penn Station entry. That was demolished. So the foundation elements were already there, columns up supporting that raised plaza. So what we did with several engineers, Brian Falconer, Matt Peets, and Rob, using these existing columns and foundation elements to transfer the load of this new addition underneath. So what that allowed is 0 tracks going out, a new structure to essentially hold up this cantilevered box up above. And then we start to activate this thing here. We replace the exterior wall up above and finish off with starting to really create spaces that the workspace above can use for exterior recreation and exterior workspace. So we'll get through. This is a rendering of that design. You can see here Plaza 33 on the right-hand side, new entrances to the train station that were done, and then how these things start to engage, right? So I'll walk you through what activation of that first 50 feet means to us and how we define that for Pen 2. Another series of diagrams here. So we broke what all the different components were of the amenity components of the building and started to locate them within the building, right? So the relocated lobby, which ended up becoming a sky lobby to transfer over the MSG passageway and get back to the center core of the building and the elevators. The activating retail components on the ground floor, the MSG access points that we had talked about, transit entries, activating the different green spaces on the exterior, the pre-function green room and town hall that all kind of create this new component on the north end. And then we have the additions and the bridge. This is a ground floor plan. The bottom is 7th Avenue, which is that main thoroughfare that's running north-south up through Manhattan. And you can start to see how the relocated lobby entrance really starts to engage with the Plaza 33. These are some renderings here, and on the bottom left here is a rendering of, that the restaurant space. This retail component here is now a fine dining restaurant that's being built out currently that engages in with seating areas and with and the landscaped areas down on Plaza 33. And then as we go up through the second floor, you start to see how the second floor space, similar to Pen 1, is really activated by these new amenity offerings that are here at Pen 2. There's a large town hall space that was created, 300-person town hall here on the north end. That's supported by pre-function and the catering services here. Balcony that connects over to this perch cafe that you see here up here on the left-hand side, and then these interior work lounges that are flanking you as you're coming through on your entry point to the elevators up on this upper level here. So walking you through how this thing manifested itself in the final architecture is a series of images here. There's a view looking up from 7th Avenue as you've just come out of that Penn Station entry, and looking up at the Bustle Addition and then at the tower above. There's another front view elevation just looking back in here. So you start to see how the architectural elements like the Madison Square Garden entries really are clear where the destination is now within these lower areas here. And which leads to kind of the activation of this north side here. This is the entry point of 2 Penn now. It has direct access from this Penn Station entry here on the right. And then you can see the accessible ramps that were added in here to make sure that the flow of people have a clear access point coming up to that upper area here. So we're now starting to walk into that front entry door. So this is a sequence where you start to see these programmed elements come to life on your pathway in. The green room is this upper right-hand side. It acts as a lounge during the non-event portions of the day. And then when there's an event that's happening here, that there's a screen that comes down and it becomes pacified. So it can be the prep room for the presenters. And then as you start moving up through, you can start to see these architectural elements show themselves. So there's a cafe right at the top end of the escalators that looks back over 7th Avenue and the covered plaza space down below. This is what we find is putting these types of amenity things along the pathway going into the building are quite effective tools in establishing what the culture of the workspace environment is. And then you have a reception area, and once you get past this area here, you're now into the secured portion of the building. This is a lounge that's directly off of the elevators that has an exterior space that you can get out through this glass wall on the left-hand side here, and having views back down to 7th Avenue, just above the Madison Square Garden entries. And then these flanking work lounge spaces here that contribute to the environment. So you can grab your coffee, come down here, and take a few calls or check your email before you're heading up to the workspace up above. This is the entryway into the actual elevator core of the building, and integration of technology and digital displays. So there's rotating digital artwork that occurs at the back end of this. The Penn 2 itself has 22 elevators that support almost it's 1.8 million square feet of office space up above. So all of the elevators were redone, modernized with new technology, destination dispatch technology. And also they were raised so that you have 10-foot high cabs inside of the original elevator cabs only had an 8-foot ceiling in them. And then what we have here is a couple views of that. So this is now entering toward the town hall space. So this is the pre-function area of the town hall. It acts as a work lounge. You can plug in here. There's obviously the Wi-Fi and everything, and there's a food and beverage component that's integrated into this area here. So it's almost like a speakeasy lounge that could support functions when they're occurring here, but when there's no functions, it becomes really a work lounge. And that leads into the second floor auditorium space. It's called the town hall here. And what we did here was create a space that has a few different modes, right? So right now you see it in its finished condition here with the full theater mode. And this is just a section cutting through it. So you've got the stage down to the left here, and the seating that's raking up here to the right. But what we found in working with ownership and their events team is that really this is one function of what this room could act as, right? So that the other scenarios that we kind of rendered through and thought of here is how can we also create a space that has a multi-purpose? So it's so the seating can all retract back. We work with a Belgian seating company, Gisette, to install this retractable seating so that you can have a functioning room here that could have a number of different events strategies. A large part of this is luncheons with different groups throughout the city that could hold the space. And then this is in its theater mode here that could have discussions, but also goes into black box modes for product launches or more intense theatrical performances. And what this starts to do is it starts to manifest architecture on that bottom 50 feet. So you start to see over on the right side here that town hall space, activation of the rooftops above it, and really the architecture starts to create and engage with the surrounding space. So what we'll do next is jump up to the bustle itself. I'm not really even sure what the origin of the bustle name came from, but we sometimes call it a side scraper, a number of different things. This thing is massive, 433 feet long, has 3 floors. They're both double height floors. It's really one of one space. This is that just doesn't exist anywhere else in New York. And the great thing about it is it's actually column free. So we are able to, from the face of the building, expand out 70 feet out to the east face here along 7th Avenue here, with only having columns around the perimeter edge of it. So it allows for, I mean, this is longer than a football field on the inside, and column free. There's this kind of third story that was added on here, kind of called the bird cage on the end. And what it allowed is to create these 2 different levels of exterior terrace space that were directly accessible from the workspace on the 8th floor and on the 10th floor up above. So in here, you can kind of see it in section, how that thing works. So that's at 70 feet from the face of the original building going to the right of column free space. And what the big idea on this is that this was really the generator for this development. It put new one of one space down at the base of the building, which are generally the more tougher floors to rent, right? So by including this in here and access to almost all the floors within the first 11 floors before you get to the mechanical level on 12, almost all of them have access to exterior space now. They have this this wonderful space that you can see here. This is a construction view of it in its finished condition before the tenants have started to fit out the space. And it has access to 2 floors, right? So you're connecting 2 large floor plates within the building to this amazing 20-foot high clear span to the underside of the deck here. So what that did was it created a challenging issue here, right? So now once you have this box that's floating up above, you also have this underside, which is this surface, an additional surface to the building that we got to design. And what we ended up doing here was really creating these patterns. It was tapered so that we could keep the steel to the absolute minimum depth. It got a little bit deeper toward the middle, and then as it cantilevered out past the diagonal columns, it got a little bit narrower. So here's just a diagram of how we had projected these 2 patterns onto the ceiling. One is this larger diagonal that dealt with the different slopes that were in the ceiling, and then this tighter triangular pattern that was actually the module of the ceiling panels themselves. this is a kind of a finished photo of it right now. Each one of these ceiling panels there has the ability for architectural lighting. So there's over just under 300,000 individual LED diodes that are at the bottom of this. And what we wanted to make sure here is that during the day, these things are on a low energy consumption. You can see the kind of sparkling effect that it has in here. And we want to make sure that we have an architectural solution here, even if the lights are turned off, that it still works. You can start to see here the sloped columns and how they lean and twist to get to the right spot to optimize the structure above. And then these things, they start to be able to change the imagery and allow for architectural lighting design and artistic images to go across the ceiling in here. This is just a snapshot of some of the capabilities that it has and the programming cycling throughout the day. Just a detailed view looking up is how, you know, these structural columns are resolved with these large openings and architectural lighting. And then at night, it really transforms into this magical space where it really becomes a part of the entertainment hub of the district and creates a new life for the street. So what we'll do is finish off here going up to the transformation of the workplace, because now that we've dealt with the bottom 10 floors of the building, it's really about, you know, these massive buildings, right? So we've got to improve the workspace that's there right now. On the left is an image of what that original facade was. It's single pane, tinted gray glass, 1/4 inch thick. These precast panels of precast concrete panels, and then there's these metal vertical lines here in the middle of each structural bay that housed high pressure induction ductwork in behind there. So that you can see the amount of glass area that goes up to the floor is quite minimal. What we ended up doing was using these techniques that we've been developing over the last 30 years of how to change the facades of buildings, improving the energy performance, but also, you know, bringing them up to clean, modern lines. You know, we ended up having more of a horizontal approach to the building. It's not the tallest building in New York. It's 31 stories, so, and it was quite wide. So we've really looked at the design here to kind of emphasize it and really give it a character of its own. What that comes down to in terms of the numbers, and I'll go through how we took this thing apart, but essentially the MEP upgrade itself on the perimeter, going from induction units to these low fan coil units at the perimeter, and the increase in vision glass, we got a 6% more efficient building just purely through that upgrade. The triple glazing of the exterior curtain wall added another 14% onto that. So the performance of this building now, just purely by going to a better performing skin on the outside, and the MEP upgrade with the better systems, got us to 20%. And then you add on to that the tenant improvements, which is a big part of energy savings for a building, the controls for lighting, and the other MEP systems throughout the building, gets you up to a 20% better performing building than what currently exists. So this is a view from the inside here. That's that high pressure duct here on the left-hand side. This is an existing view on the left. And that's the back side of that metal panel, that dark metal panel that was in between the two windows that I pointed out. On the right-hand side is what the finished condition is in here. So what we've been able to do is increase the amount of vision light on the perimeter here, right? So it goes from what used to be a 28% window wall ratio which is the ratio of, the vision glass to the opaque areas of the facade, and increase it so that we're at 56% of vision light to the opaque areas here. The reason for this is really shown here on these two slides here, is that the existing work environment that this building for its 40 years of life was really this here on the left-hand side. You've got these punched windows here, light barely getting past the first 10 feet of the area here. And this was our work environment. Unfortunately, is these cubicles and these dark spaces inside. The goal is to open it up, really set this as a new building, not a renovated building, a new building that competes with the surrounding developments. And what that does is, by increasing the amount of daylight that we want to bring in, because as human beings, we need to see the light. We need to have a sense of that we have a connection to the outdoors. So that leads to having a better performing exterior wall. This is a chart here that just summarizes how that all really works, and the math behind it. So there's a 2018 baseline of energy consumption. I won't go through all the numbers here. It was studied to go double glazing and triple glazing just to see what the values there are. So what double glazing is you end up having these insulated lights of glass that better shield you from the extremes of weather from inside the building to the outside. And then what we ended up selecting, and this was a deep dive with ownership here, is really focusing in on this triple glazing option here, because within New York City, there's the requirements that the Department of Buildings and the government agencies is, there's a new local law 97 that has a carbon emission cap that was brought in. And so all of these buildings here have a timeline that they need to start to make improvements or face penalties, right? And then that last column here really starts to talk about the amount of fines that this building would have yearly. If they did nothing, there's it's almost $600,000 worth of fines. Once we completed this thing here, you're at no fines for this for the building. And how that really works is that you take that 2018 baseline, we start to create a more efficient envelope for the building, right? Which, as you're going through here, so this is that 6% just basically going from induction to the fan coil units. And then with the exterior wall and the tenant improvements, you really start to shrink the amount of energy, carbon emissions and energy use for the building here down to something that is much more achievable. And then once you have that envelope that's high performing, then it's about using energy that is as free of carbon as possible, which is generally going to be electric energy. So what we've done here is a quick series of diagrams of the exterior wall and the steps that go through this with our fantastic facade consultants at GMS. Joe Blanchfield really came up with a strategy, and this is based on work that we had done over the last few decades of transferring the load from the new curtain wall down here through an anchor that went through the existing mullion and then back to the structural slab. So we were able to what we call overclad the existing facade by leaving it in place, right? This is super important on this building because the building was not an empty building when we were doing this. There was actually 6 floors that were fully occupied, running their business while this work was happening around them. And so you can see there's a dismantling of the facade here. Certain components were taken off, but we're essentially leaving in behind all of this existing construction and then overlaying it with a new facade on the top. Because we've increased the vision glass, we had to really go to a high performing piece of glass that reaches these pretty decent U values, which is the thermal performance of the glass. and then this solar heat gain coefficient, which is really how much light energy is coming through the glass and affecting the occupants inside. So there's a series of adding on these pieces here until you get to this overclad condition. The next step of that is working from the inside to dismantle what and enlarge those openings. So these graphics really just go through how certain components of the construction industry are able to be recycled, like the induction unit covers and the metal components within here. But there are things that are being used in construction right now, ceiling panels, sheetrock enclosures that just are not able to be recycled or reused. So they're going directly to the landfill. CMU units that have some abatement that had to have with asbestos-containing materials, that also has to go directly to landfill, whereas other components here can be recycled. So there's a slow kind of peeling away of layers off of the inside here once the new wall is in place. And then the actual vision glass from the existing units is taken out from the inside. And then we start to put in this trim kit to close it off in its final condition here. The new fan coil units around the perimeter coming in here to trim off that new opening so that when you get to that final condition here, you have a completed building. So the next phase here is really to improve the workplaces, creating additional spots for people to get to the outside. So in this area here, we created these loggia conditions on the west side of the building at the corners. Penthouse terrace. The upper part of the building was mechanical space, and it had a 2 floors of storage that were up there that we recreated office space up in there, just changing the use and creating some of the best office space within the building up on those 2 floors. And then activating the roof park up in here. Just an image of what those loggias look like. So carving back one structural bay on the outside to create just these small moments of retrieve from the daily workspace, get outside and grab some fresh air and grab the views from the building are spectacular just based on its location within Manhattan, looking to the west and also looking south. And you can see the transformation of the workplace. Again, this is what the corner used to be on these upper floors here. And then what on these what we call the innies on these corners here, being able to create space on the outside to get access to. This is a view from the upper floor, most highest floor up on the top of the building. And that's that view looking down to the south. And then on the 30th floor, there was this wraparound existing space that was just wasn't occupied, and beside it was the storage space. So that's the new office space to the right, and being able to transform these exterior spaces so that people can get out and occupy them from the upper 2 floors. And then we end up at the top of the building. Here, all of the spaces that these exterior environments for the building part were done with the landscape architect's Future Green, and they really took the top of the building. This is the southern half of the top of the building, and we created a pavilion, roughly 2,500 square foot pavilion that has a bar and seating area for interior environment, bathrooms that support the use up in here. And then they did an amazing job here of designing the exterior space with all of these different scales, meeting environments on the outside here, smaller spaces for small groups to meet and have discussions, collaboration, medium-sized spaces, and then these larger performance spaces that this exterior space here is designed for roughly about 300 people on the outside and activating that. So this is just finishing construction right now. The interiors here were designed by A+I, again, bringing that amenity component up into this space here. You can see the views here looking over toward Hudson Yards to the west here. So this is the view looking over the bar, going toward the south here with this pergola that's going to get infilled with these wood fins, and the views down toward lower Manhattan there. And this is really kind of a wrap up of the slides here. Dan, I don't know if you want to jump back in.
Sure, Mike, and thank you for that very thorough explanation of what I generally refer to. And I mean, some of it's back to the numbers. I think we have some slides on that. But you know, this development of a mixed use pieces really starts to show itself in the architecture, in these moments that occur that address each of the agencies that Mike referred to throughout the thing, and creating a remarkable destination that once was Penn Station, and really developing that opportunity for its future. I love this thing. Let's go Rangers, and we invite everybody down that isn't in New York to celebrate their advance through the playoffs, hopefully. But anyhow, I just kind of reflect on, you know, as architects and designers, we're currently being told not to be boring. But I'm not sure that that's a insightful message. I think we need to be informed, you know, what the existing conditions are, what the ramifications of climate change are. We need to be thoughtful with regard to that. Of course, we need to be creative and collaborative, and with the stakeholders, make the investment and solve those problems that we're asked to solve, and the myriad of problems that Mike explained here at Penn Station. And I just want to say it was the dedicated team of designers and stakeholders, city agencies, and ownership that remade this district and solved the problems that could be addressed, and set a future for this place and for those that are active around that. And Mike, I'll take this. I think it's extraordinary. Yeah. The engineers work to quantify the things. In not knocking this building down, 17.5 million miles were driven in a car that we saved. That's, I think, a remarkable thing. In terms of looking at buildings and understanding their value as an existing object. Just going through what Mike said, and just in terms of the performance of the building now, there's 328 single family homes that can be run. Their energy can be run now based on how much better this building performs. And another thing to think about sometimes in analyzing this, both from a development point of view, as a designer point of view, is, you know, generally, I mean, we're lucky to build buildings right now in New York City at $1,000 a square foot. And it is less, these redevelopments are capital intensive, but they are less, you know, the knockdown foundations and so on, you know, really driving those costs. And, you know, from a beginning to end period, the construction time is generally significantly lower. So these quantitative things can't be ignored when you're looking at something that exists in front of you and thinking about its future, and thinking about the future of the inhabitants of cities such as New York. And again, I just want to shout out to an extraordinary team led by Vernado, and the unbelievable insights of Brad Zismore leading A+I, and Nigel and Foster and Partners as the overall master plan architect and public space architects, built by Turner. Just a remarkable group of people working together with the single idea of recreating this district. And I think that's it there, Carlos.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mike. That was incredible. That's extremely comprehensive. And I believe this was like a 10-year a project that was 10 years in the making, and you can see the complexity that is involved and at every level that you've produced over here. And so now I'd like to introduce Claire Weitz, who's going to be the panelist, the sole panelist on the for the remainder of the time. I think we got about half an hour. Claire Weiss is a founding partner. Well, she's Canadian too. First, I'll start with that. A founding partner at WXY, a New York firm globally recognized for its community-centered approach to architecture, urban design, and planning. Her work around urban issues has been featured widely in national and international publications, including the New York Times, Metropolis, AD, Architectural Record, and many others. She has received the Architectural League of New York's Young Architects Award and Emerging Voices Award. Weiss was named one of the Fast Company's most creative people in business in 2017, awarded the Medal of Honor from AIANY in 2018, honored with Women in Architecture Award by Architectural Record in 2019, and recognized as engineering, I believe, NER's Legacy Award winner in 2024. Her firm, WXY, won the 2016 AIA New York State Firm of the Year Award. WXY is listed as one of Fast Company's world's most innovative companies for 2019 and Fast Company's most innovative companies, urban development and real estate in 2023. Claire co-founded the Design Trust for Public Space and was the co-executive director from 2000 to 2005. And added to these accolades, Claire's recently will be inducted as an honorary fellow into the REIC College at the upcoming May conference in Vancouver. So congratulations, Claire, and welcome.
Thank you. And I feel very lucky to have listened in on that incredible presentation, because not only does it take a village, it takes a village of incredibly expert people to do any of this work. So, my first question, I know there'll be lots of questions from the audience too, is could you tell us, especially on Penn, and you look at that list, not only architects and engineers, multiple architects, and in particular, Foster and Partners, how did you actually work on this together?
I'll take part of it, and Mike can follow up. First, it was the leadership and team leading of Vornado. We all got in a room. We listened to the goals of the development, both environmental, workplace, and economic goals. And then at each point, we each had our voice, both collectively and individually, throughout the process. And then there was the definition of who does what. So that certainly is always an important part of it, Claire. Our focus was on Penn 1 was on the exterior, the regulations around city planning. Brad's and A+I's focus is on the transformation of the workplace and the programming and thought around that. Penn 2, the overall massing on us and the technology around all that. All along, Foster defining the urban realm. As Mike said, we did every sidewalk, every train opening, all with an idea of accessibility on that. Foster's office, Chris West and Nigel, really pushed the quality, the thoughtfulness, the programming, planning of all of that, and then as well took the lead on the design of the icon that became the entry to the train station, the main entry to the train station. But so there was coming together and then moving apart, and then coming together and then moving apart, and any strays were brought back into the fold by the border collie of Vornado Realty Trust.
Yeah, just as a 10 acres of the district, right, of the district are going to be repaved, right? So it's I think really goes to, and that was really led by Foster for the concept, and the MNLA on executing. This is an enormous design thought, but also execution with, working with DOT and the other agencies in there to get all these components in there, and also with Sam Schwartz's office, to really try and make something special in this district on the public realm.
And right now, that's primarily 33rd Street, correct?
Well,
And of course, all of 34th and with the
all of the
transformation of it.
sidewalks,
Yeah.
all the sidewalks that surround it, and some of the images earlier on showed that sidewalk transformation. I mean, we could have spent an hour easily just going through.
Oh yeah, and it's there now. I
details.
just walked by the other day, which is really
fantastic.
great.
Yeah.
It
I mean-
comes out of Claire, real quick. Come out of, when we're studying the district, Vernado carefully asked, well, what makes that? And, our references of all of Soho, all of Rockefeller Center, and so on, so, and then of course, the developments to the west followed that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a continuity with New York on that. I'm a lover of the 5x5 concrete sidewalks of New York, but in making this district, I think that investment was important and significant, and really changing the curbs around that city, because 7th Avenue didn't accommodate the numbers of people ever.
I think what's, there's been a question asked about all of this work in a kind of probably the busiest mobility hub in North America, I think, which is Penn Station. In fact, it's larger than most European hubs. It's larger than London's, for example, most of London's, in terms of the amount of people going in and out. And that clearly changed during the pandemic. And what there was a question about this too, but I think it's really, architects obviously are not they're not responsible for larger social forces. But you could argue that we're the ones that are supposed to conduct, predict, and try and anticipate potential social forces, these climate impacts. So reflecting on this, it's really clear on the kind of environmental savings, the larger carbon impacts, what you guys really do. And you hope from a people point of view, you're going to attract people back. But so far, are you hearing if this is the case? Not only with Penn Station, but some of your other projects. Are they attracting people back?
Those that do work, Penn won, and this is really to credit both Vernado and Brad. This is more the programming and the space give their work. The building is essentially fully leased. And if you go there in any time of the day, Monday and Friday being the laggards to that, but any other time of the day, you see the intense activity on those first 3 floors, from co-working to entertainment to rest to education and so on. I'm a believer, Claire, that program is the one that works. I'm going to go back, Brad calls it the hotel model. I think I'm adjusting back over toward the education model, campus model, and headquarter model. And I do think it's working. This site was blessed by that 650,000 people. It's always got people in it. And Mike made a point. It isn't private until all the way into the 2nd floor on both properties. So there's an invitation for people who are, looking for a cup of coffee or to sit and watch, to be a part of that spectacle. And that activates everything. But I think it's a model that keeps repeating itself internationally, that you just can't build a lobby and an empty core and shell building and expect it to happen. You have to bring the program spaces into it. And then the magic, the secret sauce is everywhere there's program, there's food and beverage. And it starts with coffee and it ends with a cocktail.
So just to ask, There's been other moments that have kind of achieved this. At Lincoln Center, the idea of putting a free living room before you don't even have to buy a ticket to the concert and you can hang out there. And in a lot of ways, this open, everything open ground floor, you can go in, there's some reading areas before you climb up or take the elevator up the stairs to the second floor, where essentially you need a form of membership to get in. Do you think other cities are being influenced by this? This clearly works in New York. It's become something that's almost, at least for projects that are funded, that are trying to attract corporate businesses, something that the Apple Store started with and became clear to people. How do you see this playing out in other cities? Because you work all over North America and other places.
Some of it always existed. There were some examples that led, but now there's a lot of understanding this is the gotta do, not want to do, but got to do scenario. Whether precisely this form of investment and scale that we're talking about, but some part of it. While we were doing this, we visited the Shard, which on a major transportation hub with a hotel, with embedded in the middle of it, a food court and so on. And we took a lot of understanding of the complexity of a mixed use building, and that each piece didn't have to have its own foundation. And I think we learned a lot from that. London's leading a lot by hotels. They're inviting quite a bit of activity into those. I think that's going to start informing their office space. Toronto has been interesting. Toronto always had it, and it's not on the ground floor. It was always on -1. Yeah, you know very well. It was an extraordinary activity and investment in -1, and the connection of all of the buildings in the central district in the lower level. I hope to see that start sneaking out. When we did work at First Canadian Place, a lot of investment went into the restaurants above grade and the public realm above grade, but that's starting to happen. And I do think the lessons learned from typologies such as this are starting to go elsewhere. South America, certainly Europe, India. I think we're starting to see, again, I'm going to just say, not want to do, but got to do.
I'm going to say something just to be provocative about, in particular, Penn, but actually not, because it doesn't really relate to your other projects as much. The monumental stair, as attractive and amazing as it is, has proved a real challenge for universal access. And so now looking at that, would you do anything differently? And what are some of the sort of techniques of collective gathering you're now starting to push in your work?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question. Look, for these types of things, escalators, getting up to second floor levels, these monumental stairs, there has to be a commensurate way to have accessibility to these floors. Vornado at Penn 1 ended up creating a new elevator style for all of the elevators. So you could access the core, and they all stopped on 2, right? So it's in theory, it's taking the entry level of the building and also putting it on 2. So there's full accessibility up to those levels. And that what that does is it also allows for, when there's events that are occurring within these public private spaces that are in there within the lobby space, that you can also get behind them and access the other parts of the floors that have different types of amenities, like the gym and the co-working spaces up on 2 and 3 as well. So I think we have to constantly be balancing those things and making sure that we're creating at 2 Penn with there's a train station directly below that ground floor slab, And there were two separate elevators that were put in right adjacent to the escalators that brought you up to that sky lobby level, to create that pathway for accessibility.
But I think Claire brings up a very good point, and we were very focused, and in particular you, Michael, on barrier-free accessibility. But there's a point where it's not checking the box, it's caring very much and making sure that where I, as an abled person, go, somebody with a disability can go, no matter what that disability is. It's the means that separates the two of them that's still not solved. And I will tell you, Claire, that when we studied the 400 feet long stair, with the two transitions on both sides with ramps, we had multiple schemes. Foster, MNLA, everybody working to integrate the ramp so that when I'm disabled and walking next to you abled, that I don't have to detour. That was very, very important to us. And every solution we had caused a potential hazard for the casual user. You know how when they come in, and we're going to solve that problem someday. I'm going to keep working on. Our colleagues have. You see so many other fabulous progressive projects where abled and disabled can go up through monumentality. We haven't lost that idea that you change a plane. It's a great architectural moment, but when you have to separate, it's unfortunate. And it was a lot of focus on that. And it is a bit, I have to admit, and I think Michael agrees, we tried for a year on in models and mock-ups and so on, and didn't crack that nut.
So you've done a lot of privately maintained public space, or at least privately owned public space as well as maintained. What are some of your observations about kind of both the pros and cons about that? Because in many cities, that's all you have is private maintained public space. And in cities like Paris, London, and New York, you have a real combination of them.
I'll let Mike talk about the process, because there's no greater person who's spent more time in the chair with the city planning and so on than Michael. Sometimes, Claire, it's all we got. Think of Midtown, think of the Plaza District. There isn't a public park, but now with 555 President Sony building by Snøhetta, there's a public space. We redid the Olympic Tower, 245 Park. Of course, the GM building used to be a moat, so some of these are the only ones we have. For those who don't know, the city trades area for these spaces, arcades, covered pedestrian space, plazas. It's the only thing that works. What happened was there were giveaways in the 70s. It wasn't until Amanda Burden that she changed, and during the Bloomberg administration, and very well, she changed the whole program around that. And if you didn't put in the tree, you didn't put in the bench, you didn't put in the amenity, you didn't get your approval. And I applaud that. There are partners, and the projects that we've done, you've done, and our colleagues have done have proved the economics are there. They are maintained and so on. Is there a better way to do it? You certainly know there is. There's no better places than parks in New York City, but these are contributing. So I'm kind of the opinion, let's take what we can get, and that's but there are bigger issues. Michael?
Oh no, I agree. I mean, the design standards are very high for these spaces, and I mean that's where we applaud city planning and the work that was done to establish that. It's not just this kind of prescriptive thing saying, hey, you need this many linear feet of bench. It's like, what are the types of seating? How are they organized so that it's social seating, and do they have backs and different materials? Because look, you know, I might like to sit on a cold granite bench, but other people will choose the wooden one with the back on it. And you want to or the movable chair so that there's some agency in these spaces as well, so that people can reconfigure them. And so the process for us is, you know, we work very diligently, and that Penn One, you know, MNLA really strive to with us to kind of tackle these things head on, and do the bean counting, but also try and make memorable spaces with installations of lighting artwork throughout the spaces, and different activity zones, so that the public has a space to actually program it with either live music or different types of events that occur there.
So let me
So
ask you, you know, I know we're right at the end, and I think we're a little bit later than we were supposed to be. So right across the street, after an incredible project of not only just rehabbing, which we saw through all those slides, what you had to remove, and then the whole idea of the bustle, which I actually think is that cantilever is such an important move because it protects you from weather. I think the rest of the new buildings in the district should have it. I've argued that with city planning, and that there should be even more setbacks on the sidewalks so that the bustle can be like what you do and you get all of this view. But across the street, the client team, the investor decided to demolish the Pennsylvania Hotel. And I'm sure you guys had ideas for how you could have rehabbed that. What's your view looking back on that in this mix of new and old? Should we try and save everything? Or first, should we assume there's a 50-50 mix? What do you think is the real strategy, knowing that trying to create as much denser cities that work for climate and work for people?
Hey, Claire, that's the best question you could ask. And you know, I will say one, just on the client side, they listened. You know, Mike and I poked at that, and evaluations were made, different decisions were made. It's well beyond 50-50, right? The urban form cannot be remade at the pace of what it is. The climate won't allow it. Luckily, carbon implementation savings, especially in California and New York, are controlling some of those things. The economics around this are starting to speak to not new all the time. There is a reason for new. There were compelling issues being told at 270 Park on their decision making, and people are being very critical in terms of their thinking on it. But I think that number is going to get higher and higher in terms of
What percentage
working.
of buildings actually get saved and
Yeah, for sure.
rethought and remade?
Yeah, but Michael said it, and it's the truth. We're not building renovated buildings. They have to perform like a new building, right? They can. I mean, what's newer and what's more sustainable? I'm going to go back to it than the Pantheon, right? What's its carbon load? 0. It's a net 0 building. It's remarkable. And Hadrian wasn't necessarily the most generous leader, and he created that.
Well, one of the reasons that the site is the most sustainable building ever made is its continuity of use.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
you know, I think that points out to much of your presentation, which is adding new things, remaking it. If you're able to reuse as much as possible, even remaking it new, you are providing that continuity of use into the future.
Yeah. And just
I had
think
the
about this.
chance. Yeah,
Oh,
I
sorry,
had the
just
chance. Yeah, no.
go ahead.
I had the chance to walk through Penn One last year with Michael. He took me on a field trip, and we spent about 4 or 5 hours just walking through it. And as it's an existing building, but I felt like a paradigm shift in essence, how the office or the workplace could be, and all within the context of an existing environment. And I completely agree with Dan. It's not so much the kind of the hospitality approach, but it feels a lot more like a dense campus or a school or a college or something like that, where you have like a variety of richness and program. And it's a place that, I could see people, it is an attraction. It's like the Disney World for office workers or something like that. So
Yeah.
it was really eye-opening. And I think the other question I would have is that, after 9/11, or not question, this is my first question, that after 9/11, there was, the security became paramount. Throughout New York, there was bollards, there was kind of gates, this notion of gates going into every place. And over here, it's a transformation of thinking. Now your gates are almost invisible and two floors up. And how challenging was that? Was that the vision that the client brought to the table, or is that slowly, extracted? Because the project, obviously, the inception of it was pre-COVID, right?
Yeah, I mean, Carlos, this was a decade in the making.
Yeah.
Looking at these two buildings, and it's as architects, we live in the future, in reality, right? Like we're designing these things, and in reality, that these things come to fruition either 4 years, 5 years. This building took almost 2.5 years to build, right? And we were on the table. So the idea of opening up these buildings to the exterior and connecting to the neighborhood, bringing architecture down that people can engage with and activate the surrounding neighborhood is super important. There's a tremendous amount of effort that goes into making sure that these buildings are still safe and secure. The technology integrated into the building for speeding visitor access through with pre-registration, things like that, and also having the reception and check-in, and then also, the fortifying of the base of these very important buildings is still there. It's all within the details, and but still, it's still an important part of New York City, and especially around keeping around major transit entries and things like that. So, and that's really the work of these the master planning of that whole lower level on the exterior is integrating these things in so that they feel, not as obstacles, but parts of the urban fabric, right?
And I can attest that, 650,000 people moving through the space, it actually doesn't really feel that way. You could actually feel quite like you're in a personal environment within it. So kudos to, I guess, all the team. So we're almost near. I guess we got 4 minutes left. There were a lot of people. Well, there were a few comments. Most of them just extolling the quality of the presentation. David Clues was curious as to with the elevators on Pen 2, on you basically access to the roof. Is that a tenant amenity, or is that also open to the general public?
So the elevating, I touched on the improvements that were done to it, but to actually occupy those upper floors, there were 6 elevators that were extended up through the building, the high-rise bank, to be able to connect to that roof level. The existing 2 freights would hit all of the floors. They were also extended to get to the roof level. And then so that rooftop level is a shared amenity within the building. So that's a space that what Brad loves to call the talent. The workforce is able to access up there and create a different part of their day, accessing the amenity there and the food and beverage that goes along with that. There's an outdoor kitchen that can transform the space so that it activates it in the good weather days as well, and allows the room for activities to be programmed up in that space as well.
So we're 2 minutes shy of 2 o'clock, and I think I just want to send a thank you on behalf of NORR, NORAD, and Silvio, who still having some difficulties connecting, and for making this happen, and for everyone on the panel for the time, for everybody on the presentation. I saw the time and an effort that was required to put this together. And so this is fantastic, and we greatly appreciate your contribution to this and informing our NORR and the students and the wider audience, and bringing these projects that you've done over the years and your experience to NORAD. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Claire. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you
Great
all.
stuff, Carol.
Well, thank you.